Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. So glad to see you have join us tonight. Let everybody start piling in on this nice Thursday afternoon or evening, whichever one it was for you. We have a great webinar planned for you tonight. It's called Precision in Practice, Mastering the Art of Legal Transcription with Tools and Technology. So please feel free to say hi as you come in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from tonight. We'd love to hear from you. My name's Tammy Candeloro. I'll be your host, coming from South Carolina. So glad to have you all with us.
I see
This
lots of
webinar.
Right,
I know.
It's so nice. Here. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome.
Georgia so there where I am. I like that.
I know. I see a lot even from Connecticut, Tennessee, California. That's awesome. All right, so everybody, this webinar is approved for AAERT CEU credit. That's a mouthful, right? Mm-hmm. In order to be eligible for that, you do have to stay logged in for the full hour tonight. And those who do, a survey link will be emailed to you from info@blueledge.com tomorrow. Okay, so you'll get that link, fill out the survey. At the end of the survey, when you hit submit, just stay on the screen and you'll be redirected to your certificate that you can use to get that credit for the CEUs, okay? We are also going to have an after hours community game for a $25 gift card at the very end of the webinar. It's absolutely not required that you attend for CEU credit, but it is really fun, you guys. So I do encourage you to think about staying for it. It'll only be 5 minutes or so, however long it is when we have fun and get going. But it's a great way to get to know your people and help build the community. So I do encourage you to stay if you have time and you can. Like I said, we do have a wonderful evening planned for you. So first, we're going to start off by doing a deep dive into punctuation, everybody's favorite. And then next, we're going to help you discover what you didn't know that you didn't know about getting the most out of your audio. So you'll have to stay tuned and see what that's about. And then lastly, we're going to have an expert insight and discussion on legal transcription and ASR best practices. So each of these 3 sections will be corners, so to speak, of a focused expert on each. And we'll take your questions throughout the session tonight at allotted times, as much as time permits. Anything left unanswered, we'll do our best to answer throughout the webinar, but we do have a pack tonight. So anything left unanswered, we will find a way to get those answers to you through some of their later communication. So just kind of stay tuned for that, okay? We won't leave you hanging, I promise. Please feel free to share your thoughts and reactions with us tonight. You'll see the reaction icon at the bottom of your Zoom that you could do. We love to see all the love and encouragement through there. Yeah, see it coming through right there. And also the chat box, like many of you already saw, to use. And then we will have the Q&A pod again, like we always do, where you could put all your questions for us to get to for you. You are able to upvote if someone puts something in there, and that will be that. If you really help to keep that clean, where only questions are going in there, it will be huge for us, and being able to grab your questions. And I see the one right there. Yes, we will have a recording of the webinar. It will be on our website under on demand, and we'll also email them out to the list of registrations. Okay, so I want to introduce you to the amazing group of people who have offered their time for us all tonight. Please show them your love and support, as I know you always do. You guys are always amazing. We have a wonderful panel for you. And we're going to start with a very familiar face if you guys know BlueLedge webinars. Ben, Mr. Jaffe, will you please start yourself off and introduce yourself for us?
Thank you. Yes, my name is Benjamin Jaffe. I am currently the Director of Operations at Neil R. Gross and Company, based in Washington, D.C. And I'm also the Vice President of AAERT and formerly was with BlueLedge. So I'm very happy to be back.
Awesome. We're super happy to have you here. Thank you. And how about you, Miss Natalie? Will you go next for us?
Hello, my name is Natalie. I've been in the court reporting industry for 19 years. I'm currently a stenographic court reporter and the BlueLedge legal transcription instructor. I've worked in this industry in many capacities, including as a stenographic reporter, a digital reporter, a legal transcriptionist, and as an instructor. I was previously an instructor at Stenotype Institute in Orlando, where I taught court reporting English, case catalyst stenograph software, stenography theory classes, and court procedures. And I've been with BlueLedge since early 2019, so almost 6 years now.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you. We're so excited to have you, Natalie.
Mhm.
Merritt, you want to go next for us?
Yes, I would love to. Yeah, Natalie and I have worked together for many years, and same with Ben. So happy to have both of them on here tonight. Many of you know my history, but just really quickly, I started working in the industry about 13 years ago, working as a digital reporter, started about 12 years ago when Natalie and I started the digital reporting department at the court reporting agency we worked at, trained, and the whole operations of it. And just now I'm currently the director and lead instructor at BlueLedge. I'm also on the board of directors for AERT and currently serving as the certification development chair.
Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Miss Elizabeth? Do you want to go next for us?
Hi, my name is Liz. My resume doesn't look anything like theirs. So I actually worked in trucking for about 21 years, and then I came over to legal. I got my paralegal degree back in 2010 and never did anything with it, but decided that when trucking wasn't working out, I was going to do something. I just didn't know what. And so I started transcribing. I've been a reporter. I now exclusively transcribe. I don't do reporting anymore. And I started my company with my sister this year. So
awesome. And a true fan and proponent of the industry too. She's recruited like a majority of her family into the business. She loves it through and through. It's good if you're willing to like bring your daughters in and show them and tell them all about it. So thank you so much for joining us, Liz. We're super happy to have you. And last but definitely not least, Miss Lindsay, will you introduce yourself for us?
Hi, my name is Lindsay Bookout. I'm a content development specialist with Veritex Legal Solutions. My degree is in technical writing, but I started my career as a legal proofreader for stenographers and transcriptionists, which eventually led to my being hired for quality assurance at a Canadian court reporting firm where I was trained to scope and transcribe. That position then evolved into my training, new stenographers, transcriptionists, scopists, and proofreaders. And when that firm was acquired by Veritex, I was very fortunate to be offered the job I have now, which is creating high-level training content for legal transcriptionists.
Awesome. Lovely. Very nice, diverse panel we have tonight. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. I see one quick question on the thing about, Liz, the name of your company.
Legacy Transcription Services.
That's right. And so you should have it in the webinar information too, you guys, if you need it. There's information for all the panelists. You can follow links out to them and whatnot too. So we have a ton planned, you guys. We got to get going and moving through. So we're going to start and kick it over to the very first corner where we are literally going to take you to class. Okay, so grab your thinking caps and your attention span. We know it might be the end of your day, but we have faith in you that this is you can pull the full concentration through. It's going to be so worth it. Natalie is going to walk us through some of the most common comma pitfalls. And this is something that's vital, of course, in transcripts, but also for managers, reporters, anyone in the field. It's a critical knowledge set for you to have. Grammar use is a very large part of how people perceive us, and that goes for our clients or other people that we speak with. So especially in our industry, this is something that's critical to have no matter your role, no matter your years of experience in transcription, or if you're not in transcription. So we're very excited about this part. Let's go ahead and we'll get going. We will pause after each pitfall. If there's a question that you guys have, something specific to that, we'll be able to pick one to answer, and then we'll get going from there. So we'll see how it goes. Our first time sharing a video on here, you guys, so hopefully everything will go well. And let me go ahead and get it started for us and share that video.
Welcome to Punctuation Corner. In today's Punctuation Corner, we'll focus on some pitfalls when it comes to comma usage. Yes, everyone's favorite punctuation mark. In all seriousness, proper punctuation is essential in legal transcription, but commas seem to be one area that many students and working transcriptionists alike struggle to master. AAERT has said that testers on the CET practical exam often get points deducted for comma errors. Commas can be quite confusing when we haven't ironed out the basics, and sometimes we just need to brush up on some of the rules if they haven't been reviewed in a while. Remember, if you know comma rules well, it'll help greatly with knowing when not to use other punctuation marks, such as semicolons, another punctuation favorite. So today we'll be reviewing some common comma pitfalls. Let's get started. Comma pitfall 1, comma usage with coordinating conjunctions. The acronym FANBOYS is often used to remember the 7 coordinating conjunctions. These are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. You'll see the rules we've covered accumulate at the top left of the screen for you to reference when needed as we add complexities. In order to properly understand comma usage regarding coordinating conjunctions, we must first make sure that we understand how to properly identify an independent clause. An independent clause must contain a subject and a verb and must express a complete thought. The subject of a sentence performs the action of the sentence and the verb is an action word. John threw the football. Bill is sick. Our play debuts next Thursday. So we can see each of these examples has a subject and a verb, and they each make sense on their own as independent sentences. Comma rule. A comma is used before a coordinating conjunction that connects 2 independent clauses. Note how each clause can stand alone. The comma goes before the coordinating conjunction connecting the clauses. The painters are working hard, but they won't be finished today. The painters are working hard is independent. It makes sense on its own, has a subject and a verb. They won't be finished today is also independent, makes sense on its own, and has a subject and a verb. We use the comma there before the conjunction but, which is the coordinating conjunction connecting the 2 independent clauses. Remember to bring in the mail and don't forget to take out the trash. These are also 2 independent clauses. The subject is the implied subject you because they're written in the second person. So they each have a subject and a verb. Each clause makes sense on its own. We have the coordinating conjunction and there connecting the 2 clauses, and we use a comma before the conjunction. Now we're going to go over an example that doesn't follow this rule. Okay. If either of the clauses is not independent, a comma is not used. So here we have Raul has been restoring a vintage Ford Mustang and plans to sell it for a huge profit. So our first clause is independent. Raul has been restoring a vintage Ford Mustang. But our second clause is dependent here. Plans to sell it for a huge profit. What makes it dependent is that it can't stand alone because there's no subject. It relies on the first part of the sentence to make sense. So because they're not both independent, we don't use a comma before the conjunction. Now, when we add a subject to that second clause, that makes that second clause independent. And then we would use a comma. Raul has been restoring a vintage Ford Mustang, independent. He plans to sell it for a huge profit. Now that clause is independent, and we would use the comma before the conjunction. Exception 1. If both independent clauses are short, meaning no more than 4 words, then the comma is not used before the conjunction. I'm tired and I'm going to bed. So here we've got 2 independent clauses and a coordinating conjunction, but the longest clause here would be the second one, and it's only 4 words. So then we don't use a comma with the conjunction here. He's already lied, so you shouldn't trust him. Again, we've got 2 independent clauses, The longer clause, you shouldn't trust him, that one's only 4 words. So again, we omit that comma with the conjunction. Exception 2, if a dependent clause is followed by 2 independent clauses that are equally influenced by the dependent clause, then no comma is used between the independent clauses. So that's a mouthful. I know that might sound a little confusing at first, but we're going to go over how to recognize this exception. This is an often overlooked exception. If you don't show up to work on time, you will be written up and you will possibly be fired. In this example, we can see how the dependent introductory clause relies on what follows it to make sense. If you don't show up to work on time. The 2 clauses that follow that sentence are independent. So let's break this down a little bit further. If you don't show up to work on time, you will be written up and you will possibly be fired. You will be written up can stand on its own. You will possibly be fired can stand on its own. Note how each independent clause that follows the dependent clause is in an equal position to the other. So how do we test this? We can test this by putting that dependent clause before each independent clause. If you don't show up to work on time, you will be written up. The sentence is definitely saying that. If you don't show up to work on time, you will possibly be fired. The sentence is also saying that. So the sentence is giving us 2 pieces of information and it's borrowing the same dependent clause for both. When that's the case, you don't use a comma before that conjunction that's connecting the 2 independent clauses. Comma pitfall.
Just very quickly, I'm going to keep going since we don't have a direct question for that pitfall, and I'll answer this other one at the end.
Pitfall 2, the comma splice. A comma splice occurs when a comma improperly connects 2 independent clauses that are not joined by a coordinating conjunction. So here's an example. Here are 2 examples of improper comma splices. Tommy is working on his science project. He's hoping to win first place at the fair. These are both independent sentences, independent clauses. They can stand on their own, but there's no conjunction there connecting them. So the comma is incorrect here. I don't remember if I turned off the oven. I'm heading home. I'm heading back home to double check. Again, independent, both are independent, but there's no coordinating conjunction between them. So that makes that comma incorrect. A semicolon may be used if the independent clauses are closely related. A period is also correct, whether related or not. Tommy is working on his science project, semicolon. He's hoping to win first place at the fair. So this is correct because they're both independent. There's no coordinating conjunction, and the sentences are closely related to each other. Tommy is working on his science project, period. He's hoping to win first place at the fair. Also correct. A period is always going to be correct when you just have standard sentences that are not joined by coordinating conjunctions. If you're not sure, if you're debating whether or not the sentences are closely related, go with the period because the period is always correct. Now, when we add a coordinating conjunction, the comma works. Tommy is working on his science project and he's hoping to win first place at the fair. I don't remember if I turned off the oven, so I'm heading back home to double check. So those conjunctions make the comma correct here. Comma pitfall.
Okay, I see a question here, Natalie, we'll throw in here at this time. It says, is there any value to using a semicolon over a period or vice versa?
The semicolon is just a softer break than a period. So we can use them to show that close relationship between sentences. But if some people get the ick with semicolons, they can be confusing. So you can just always go with periods between sentences, whether they're closely related or not. So yeah, just that it's a softer break than a period.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, let's continue with pitfall number 3.
All 3, non-essential clauses. Non-essential clauses are extra information outside of the main idea of the sentence. They could be removed from the sentence and the sentence would still make sense. A comma pair is used to set off non-essential clauses. There are different types of clauses that can be essential or non-essential to the sentence. Today we'll focus on relative clauses. Relative clauses are used to modify nouns or pronouns, and these clauses begin with words like who, which, in which, and that. We use commas to set off relative clauses when they're non-essential, and we omit the commas when they are essential. Gina, who lives next door to me, is a flight attendant. The subject of the sentence here is clearly identified by name. So a name is usually a strong enough identifier. Gina, who lives next door to me, is a flight attendant. So that means because we've identified the subject here by name, the thing that we're describing is identified by name, we can remove that relative clause from the sentence and the meaning of the sentence doesn't change. Gina is a flight attendant. I don't need that descriptor. That descriptor is extra information. So we use commas around it. Sometimes relative clauses are essential to the sentence. When that's the case, commas are not used. The barista who always gets my order wrong was promoted to manager. Now, the term barista by itself is not a strong enough identifier to help the reader know to whom we're specifically referring. There are lots of baristas, so the phrase who always gets my order wrong is essential to the sentence in order to identify which particular barista we're talking about. The employees who submit the receipts by 4 p.m. on Friday will be reimbursed on their next paycheck. The phrase who submit their receipts by 4 p.m. on Friday is essential to the meaning of the sentence. If we were to remove that relative clause from the sentence, it would read, the employees will be reimbursed on their next paycheck. So employees by itself is too broad for us to know which specific employees will be reimbursed. So we need that relative clause. That's how we know it's essential by that test, that removal test. Generally, a name is a strong enough identifier. A particular relationship to the speaker can oftentimes also be a strong enough identifier, for example, mother or father. However, as is often the case, there are exceptions. For example, if there's more than one person with the same name being discussed within the transcript, then we have to take that into account for clarity of the record. The context can create exceptions to the rule. To demonstrate how an exception might occur in specific instances, let's talk about the first sentence again. Gina, who lives next door to me, is a flight attendant. Let's say that in the same transcript that we're working on, we've been given information to know that there's more than one person with the name of Gina. In a situation like that, the name Gina would not be a strong enough identifier, making the relative clauses essential to the meaning of the sentence. For example, here we've got a conversation where we're discussing more than one Gina. Question, your best friend and your sister are both named Gina? Answer, yes. Question, and Gina, who is your sister, lives up the street? Yes. Gina, who lives next door to me, is a flight attendant. So now here we see that that nuance, because of the particular facts of the case, the nuances of the case make these relative clauses essential to who we're talking about. Yeah, the Gina who lives up the street, the Gina who lives next door to me. So we remove those commas when we have exceptions to the rule, making those relative clauses essential. So that wraps up this edition of Punctuation Corner. I hope this helped to refresh some rules that you maybe haven't reviewed in a while.
Awesome. Thank you. And I love that last example, particularly is my favorite, because I feel like that really struck home with something I definitely had forgotten somewhere along my years. But I love this question here. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll do my best to read it just in case you can't see it, Natalie, in the Q&A pod. It says, how do you handle the dreaded sentence starters and so but, or but so and, or so and but? How do you
Yeah.
handle those with commas or not commas?
In legal transcription, I would say that maybe 70% of the questions begin with so or and. So it's just the way that we speak. So we're not going to use commas after those when they start the sentence. There will be exceptions. For example, if a direct address follows, if it says like, and Dr. Smith, when did you first see patient X, right? So the comma would go after the and because of the comma pair for the direct address, but not because of the and at the beginning. So if so, and, or but begin the sentence, there's no reason to put a comma after it unless it's part of a comma pair. So if the comma is there for another reason, not just because of the conjunction at the beginning.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we do have a couple more. We're right on our time of where we need to get headed, but let's try to squeeze them in real quick. So on the example of the last one you gave, what if the attorney or questioner doesn't specify which GINA? So in that example, say that that part of the Q&A didn't happen. Would you leave the comma after GINA?
If we don't know, if we're not given any information that there's another GINA involved, we would continue using those commas just like in the original example. Only if there's an exception where we know for sure that we're talking about more than one person with the same name, then we just have to make sure that the transcript is clear as to who we're talking about. So that's only then are we going to omit those commas. Name is a strong enough identifier. Personal relationship to the person can be a strong enough identifier, but even then there's exceptions because we could say most people only have one mother, but there are people that have adoptive mothers and biological mothers, they have stepmothers. So there's all, there can be exceptions. So we're always going to take each case on its own merit.
Love that. Okay, and I'm going to squeeze in one more. Okay. So do you handle okay the same way? So kind of like what we were talking about in the previous example.
Okay and all right. When those begin the sentence, we're going to use a period there after okay and after all right. Now, again, there can be an exception if a person says like, okay, Mr. Jones, then you would use okay, comma, Mr. Jones, period, right? And then continue on after that. But generally, yeah, those are also very common starters, okay and all right. Just go with a period after those.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Natalie. You are amazing. You're just such a wonderful instructor. We're so thankful to have you. So thank you for your time and putting this together and the explanations. I know it back and forth, but man, to me, that takes a lot of guts to answer questions like that live. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. So we're going to switch over now to our second corner, all about sound and how you guys can get the best. So Ben, thank you again so much for joining us. We're so glad to have you here back home. Well, our home, we consider you a part of our family. So you have a new home, but we're happy for that too. You are known for so many contributions within our industry, and not the least of them is as a sounding board, an information hub, and even a conference panelist, all about digital reporting and transcription tech. So we're so glad to have you here with us today to go through some of this. So we've all seen a lot of great things and information out there about how to get the best sound quality with different tools and software. But I'm so excited about the invaluable nuggets that you have for us today to go on the hardware side of improving sound quality. So we're all ears to hear what you have to share with us. Please feel free to take it away and we'll fit in some questions, you guys, at the end.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I was very excited to see Natalie's presentation. She's my grammar hero. So, she can quote from like Morrison's, like tell you exactly the page number and all that. It's really impressive from when I worked with her directly. But thank you so much for having me. And yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about how your hardware in your computer can actually impact your what you're listening to. I don't think people realize that, right? And a lot of you probably went to the AAERT webinar last week that was all about how to edit the sound, to take out a buzz, or to make it sound better. And that's really good. I mean, that's a good skill to have. But part of the other thing to realize is what you're listening to on the you're listening to the audio too can completely change what you're hearing. So we're going to start off with a poll here. Can we get a poll up all about what is your primary piece of equipment you use to listen to your audio? Is it wired headphones? Do you do wireless? How about earbuds, speakers, or do you have some other preferred way that you want to have your audio pushed out to you? And we'll just give you maybe a minute or so here, and then we'll have the results up on the screen. But definitely what you listen to impacts what you're hearing, and changing your piece of hardware can really change what you're hearing. So are those results ready? Okay, so most people are listening on wired headphones. Okay, that's pretty good. They're probably big, giant ones that go over your ears. Some people are wireless. Ooh, I'm gonna have things to say about that. Some people are doing earbuds, okay, and some people are doing speakers, and nobody is doing anything else. So, well, that is good. Well, first, a little bit about the difference between earbuds and different types of headphones. So what is inside of an earbud or a headphone that makes the noise is called the driver. And that's basically like a little drum head. And so it vibrates based off of the sound. And the bigger the headphone, usually the bigger the driver inside. So a little tiny earbud that you have in your ear has like a 10 millimeter or 1 centimeter driver, about about a third of an inch. And then if you go up to maybe a big pair of over-the-ear headphones, those will have a 40 or a 60 millimeter or 4 to 6 centimeter wide driver inside of it, diaphragm if you're used to microphones. And so that's just like with a drum, right? If you think about, you hit a very tiny drum, it's going to have one sound. If you hit a very big drum, it's going to have a very different sound. And so the same thing happens in your headphones. Different headphones, based off of their quality of manufacturing, based off the size of the driver, based off of their design and how they're designed to funnel that sound into your ear, will have a completely different characteristic. So I always recommend, especially to transcribers, to have multiple pairs of audio listening devices. It's always a good idea to have a pair of speakers. Some speakers have 100 millimeter drivers inside of them. It's always good to have a nice pair of headphones, and it's always great to have a little earbud, because sometimes that narrowness of sound that an earbud will have will help you hear something, or the bigness of sound of speakers in your room will help you hear something. So it's really good. You don't have to make a huge investment. I'm not saying go out and buy a $300 pair of earbuds or headphones. I'm saying go and buy, $10, $15 earbuds to have around. Go buy a decent pair. I have a decent pair of speakers I like that were like $45 at one of the tech chain stores. So it's not a huge investment, but that can really change the sound by which you're hearing. So if you're struggling to hear a word, maybe there's a lot of noise in it, try it on a different device. So that's a really important one. Now, I did say I would get back to that wireless issue. And so wireless is, what it's doing is it's coming out of the sound card of your computer, and then it's going through some type of transformation process, digitization process. And when it's doing that, it's compressing all of that data and making decisions about which part of that audio file it keeps and which part of that audio file it gets rid of, so it can compress it to get to your ear. So if it's Bluetooth, if it's 2.4 gigahertz, whatever it is, it's really the computer now and its algorithm is deciding what you hear. And that can have an impact on what you're hearing. Now, I'm not saying that every pair of wireless earbuds or headphones are bad. I love my wireless earbuds. I walk around all the time with them on. They're great. I listen to TV shows when my wife wants to go to bed, all of those kind of things. They're a tool, but they shouldn't be your be-all, end-all tool. And the other thing you should really avoid, and I know people are going to hate me for this, never use noise canceling devices, especially as a court reporter. I know there's some court reporters here because I have the question pod open. I saw the letter CER out of the corner of my eye. So I'm just going to tell you, especially if you're a court reporter, but also you transcriptionists out there, never, ever, ever use noise canceling headphones. Now you may go, Ben, why? Of course, right? So what a noise canceling headphone does is it has a little microphone on the outside of the headphone that listens to everything that's happening in the environment. And if it considers it noise, it will create an inverse wave. So we think back to like high school science and waves, and you have your, your sound wave and all that. Well, the inverse to the sound wave will cancel the amplitude of that sound wave. So they actually pump extra sound into your ear to cancel out the sound that you are hearing. Well, as a reporter, if there's a really noisy air conditioning or an elevator squeaking or some buzz that's heard in the room, and now the microphone on your headphones are canceling it out, it's not getting canceled out when it's coming into your court reporting software. It's only getting canceled out when it's going into your ear. So you're not actually hearing what then the reporter or the transcriber will have to go transcribe, and you will have a very annoyed transcriber. So again, I know this is all about transcription tips, but same thing happens with you in the transcription world. If you are in a room, I love to have my fan on. So I always have my fan on, always have that low hum behind me. Well, if you have a real low hum or somebody with a deep voice, I can't do that. I don't have a deep voice. It's okay. But you have somebody with a deep voice, and now that low hum is being reversed in your ear, you actually are going to lose some of that person's voice, some of that characteristic, which will help you hear. So, yeah. So again, why you never, ever use noise canceling. Please, I beg of you, these are just the little things in life.
Love it. That's like a
Yep.
mic drop. I'm telling you, that's one of the things I'm saying was like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, I'm sorry, maybe others knew that, but when you were telling that before, I was like, what? Get out. That's a great nugget. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, for new people, it's hard because you get sold these amazing, Bose, I'll say the name, headphones, with this noise canceling and with this and that, and go spend a ton of money. Don't spend a ton of money. My favorite pair of headphones is like $40 pair of Sony headphones that you can buy at like Walmart or Best Buy or B&H or one of those. Like, great. Get yourself a decent pair of earbuds, great, $20, a nice pair of speakers. I mean, for $100, you can have all your bases caught. The other thing that can impact what you hear, I talked a little bit about your sound card in your computer. Computers ship with a sound card, right? You have this chip inside your computer which processes the sound. Okay, just like your graphics card processes the image. And you see gamers pay up big money for these $1,000 graphics cards so they can have these giant screens and nothing ever ripples on it. Well, your sound card is the same way, actually. Your sound card can have digital ripples in the sound. And so you can actually go out and buy external sound cards, which can do the processing of the sound coming off your computer itself. And so I've noticed a lot of people will go buy sound cards if they don't think their computer has a great sound card. And again, these range from $20 to $300. A decent one can be found for $40 or $50 from any major retailer. Just look up USB sound cards. And so that, they will reprocess your audio in sometimes a more fuller way. They're more made for like 5.1 sound to be pumped into you, multi-channels to be mixed a little bit better, especially if we are all doing, multi-channel, audio these days. So those are kind of my two biggest tips around sound. And then the last thing I want to bring up is boosting your sound. We've all gotten audio files that are way too low. And certainly you can go into a program and you can go into that program and crank it up. but what you end up having is like this little bit of like alteration in the sound level because it's getting boosted up. And so that's like digital artifacting in the sound. And so what I can recommend is there's a product on the market called Boosteroo, which is actually a product that it takes the analog out of your computer, and it analog basically through electronic amplification boosts the level of the audio. Also, you could buy yourself something called a headphone amplifier. And these you can buy at some major retailers, B&H or one of those. And what it does is it gives you a little volume knob for a signal of audio so that you can up the volume. Some of them even have multiple ports. So back to what I said about having that multiple audio channels, having multiple headphones, you could plug one thing into your computer and your speakers, your headphones, everything works right there. All you do is you just pick it up, put it on your ear, turn the sound up. No having to go into the program and switch it. It's all right there for you. So those are some, some options for people. But I see questions coming in. So Tamara, you
There
want
are
to
some.
ask away?
Yeah, sure. I'm looking through a couple too to see definitely a lot of questions around the noise canceling. And one of them that I thought was kind of a great one to ask, because it does say the transcriptionist on that side too. It's so important to get that good audio on the front end, is what about noise canceling microphones that are used like in the courtroom or something like that? Are they actually being a detriment to the quality of audio that's going to come out?
So noise canceling microphones are slightly different. That's more through noise isolation, which is a slightly different process. And that actually has to do with the shape and the pattern of the design of the microphone. So yes, if it is a super cardioid or it has a very tight forward shape and you stand behind it, behind the pattern, it will be a detriment to the recording. But if you are on the correct end of that and the pickup pattern of that microphone is in the correct shape for where you are standing, then no, it will not be a detriment to you. It really has has much more to do with the isolation of the microphone to where you're standing. So if you need to stand all around it and people are moving, make sure you're getting an omnidirectional. If you have a podium and somebody is always going to stand at that podium, then you can have a cardioid or even a super cardioid mic. Just know that the more people shift with a cardioid, or especially with a super or hyper, you can get up that scale, super hyper, the more you get up that scale, the more fine that microphone pattern is, the less somebody can shift.
Okay. And then I'm going to throw this one out to you, Ben. It says, what's your take on FX sound program that's basically a digital mixer?
So that's what it is. It is a digital program that allows you to go in and do things to the audio file. But what people need to understand about any digital program, and the AAERT webinar that went on last week went into this a lot, but so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but what anybody has to understand about any digital audio editing program is that they are destructive. And I don't mean you're totally destroying the file, but in the thought of being constructive versus destructive, they are eliminating things. So when you go in there and you say, I want to take out all the hum from something, you are actually removing part of that signal, which then if you listen to it, that's no longer there. Same thing with if you now take audio that's only reaching, maybe negative 32 decibels and you're stretching it, you're having to make those blocks bigger than they are supposed to be. And in a way, by changing them, you are somewhat changing them in a way that it could never go back to the way it is. Again, not destroying them, but totally in a way that it can't go backwards. And that's what we mean by destructive, not always the deletion or the burning down of things. But
I'm laughing
so it
because I
is a
think you
little
dropped the
different.
mic.
What?
Go ahead, sorry. I was saying, I
It's a
think you
little.
dropped the mic for someone else because you got the little shocked emoji when you said
Oh,
that. Go
yeah.
ahead.
I'm not saying don't use it, though. That is a tool. Look, if you have tried other things and you need to go in and do something, do it. Like you gotta find that word. Like you don't want to put that, nobody wants to put in their transcript indiscernible or, anything like that. And that's not what we want to do. So we want good
Yeah.
transcripts. So use all the
Great.
tools at your fingertips. I'm just today talking about the audio tools because that doesn't lead to permanent change. That just leads to a different impact to your environment.
Okay, perfect. So we do have some more. We're a little crunched on time, you guys. Maybe we could, well, at the very least, make sure to get these answered to you. It might be great anyway, because it's some technical answers and everything like that, or get them through. Or Ben, by all means, if you have time or are able to answer within the chat, feel free to do that too. No pressure. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the next corner. You guys, love your questions and upvotes. Thank you so much. It's very, very helpful. Thanks, Ben, for your time. I told you he was techie, you guys. You see how that all just like flows right off his tongue? Like, how does he do that? I don't know. It's in his brain. All right. Look at who we have. We have Miss Merritt and Lindsay and Liz. Thank you so much. We appreciate you guys for your corner coming up. We're going to go and dig into some best practices, do's and don'ts, and lessons learned. A lot of this is going to have a spotlight on ASR, speech to text, you guys, because it's absolutely a game changer, right? And it's something that's evolving and coming into the industry more and more every day. And so a lot of questions are begged, like, how does this fit into your transcription career currently? And what does it mean for legal transcriptionists on how to be successful in their roles? So we're going to dive into here, get some tips and info from our panelists here. And I'm going to start with you, Liz. So you and I talked quite a bit about your perspective actually on the necessary balance between typing from scratch and using ASR. And it was obvious that you've considered and implemented a certain formula within your work as a working transcriptionist and a manager. So can you kick us off by sharing with us, what do you personally see as a best practice for integrating ASR as a working transcriptionist? Should one just dive straight in head first?
No, I don't personally think so. So there's something to be said for creating a transcript organically and typing it up. And there's a lot of things that as you do it, you start to remember the transcript should look like this. The sentence structure should look like this. The format should be here. And you learn when to break those things up as you're doing it organically. If you start out with ASR, you're going to miss some of that. And so my personal thought on it is the average transcriber typing from start should average about 4 hours of work to 1 hour of audio. So you've got that 4-to-1 ratio going. I feel like you need to get to that point before you start bringing in the ASR. You need to get there and be pretty consistent at your 4-to-1 or maybe better than that. But you need to get to that point where you're consistent. You know what you're doing. You know how to do this without ASR, because if something happens and you can't get your ASR, you don't want to be in the bind where you're going back to your client saying, sorry, I can't do it.
I see you get a lot of thumbs up of people right on board and up track with you. They probably learned from experience as well and have seen it. So I told you. So great. Thank you for that. How about you, Merritt? Is there anything that you'd add to that from what you've seen on the educational side of picking up ASR and transcription?
Yeah, I want to add to that. I totally agree, Liz. You need to know what it looks like, because if you're shown something, you are more likely to just assume it's correct and not question it. Whereas like you're starting with a blank canvas, you're more likely to go research, what am I supposed to do here? And I definitely agree. You need to know the foundation.
Great, thank you. So now let's hop over. We'll talk a little bit about some tools briefly. So Liz, there were 2 categories that we talked about as kind of your mantra for new transcriptionists working with you. And I loved the stepping stone kind of style that you had with it. So what would you say tools that are a must from the start of your legal transcription career, and perhaps maybe tools that can wait? What would you elaborate on for that?
So, I mean, of course, you've got to have your word processing, whether that's Word or WordPerfect or whatever you're using to make your transcript in. You have to have your foot pedal, because if you try to do it without a foot pedal, you're really doing yourself a disservice. I promise you, I've got my daughter who hates to use a foot pedal, and I tell her all the time, I don't think you understand how much longer this is taking you by doing it without the foot pedal. And you've got to have a good pair of headphones. That same daughter likes to listen to her audio through the computer speakers, and I keep telling her it's going to be wrong every time. You're not going to hear it the same way if you don't have a pair of headphones. So, you know, you've got to make sure that you have those things. Everything else can wait. You need to have the basics. Once you get the basics, then you can start adding in your, oh God, I've lost the word for it. Your text expanders. You can start adding in your ASRs and all of that other stuff, but you start kind of stepping them up, bring in what you need to bring in, and then get to work with that. Learn how to use that and integrate it so that you're working faster, then move on to the next one.
Yeah. And I love actually even then how you just brought out that you're working faster, because I think some people might want to jump to the other tools so early because you are trying to make money and make more per hour and get the speed going. But the truth is, if you put that work in at the very beginning, it's actually going to pay off for you threefold, fourfold, whatever, right? As you continue to go on instead of trying to backtrack. So great tips. Thank you. All right, Miss Lindsay, I'm going to bring over some punctuation thoughts to you. So it's so vital in what we do in legal transcription. We had a whole segment on just commas. Can you help elaborate for us? What are your thoughts on ASR and punctuation?
Yeah, so any punctuation input by ASR software is based solely on the rules of grammar, which means that when it encounters a situation that doesn't fall perfectly within a grammatical equation, the software can only give you its best guess. And as we all know, verbatim speech is challenging for humans to punctuate, and it requires context, knowledge, and experience that ASR just doesn't have. One example that's come up for me recently in ASR is dashes, false starts, repetitions, stammers, cleanup, things like that all get punctuated in a way that, as far as I have seen, can't really be duplicated by ASR because it's different every single time. And so things like that can be frustrating and can sometimes add more time to your editing. But that being said, ASR, if you're using a good software, isn't going to go rogue and start randomly inserting colons or, adding commas at the end of sentences. But it's still just only going to be able to give you its best guess. So you'll always have to do some editing, which you have to do anyway. So it's not that big of a problem. But one thing to be aware of is how incorrect punctuation can alter the meaning of a sentence. So if you're coming into an ASR draft and you read something that's incorrectly punctuated and it changes the way that it's being read, you might leave it incorrectly punctuated, or you might not be able to figure out kind of what's going on. So you just have to be really careful and read it with a critical eye. And my best tip is, if there's punctuation already there and you can't make sense of what's going on, take all of the punctuation out of the sentence, out of the paragraph, and just start over kind of with fresh eyes and see if you can make sense of it. But overall, I just say to take the punctuation with a grain of salt. It definitely adds to our efficiency, but it also ensures job security because of how crucial punctuation is, and it can't do it yet. They need us.
Right. Always, always, always. Great tips. Thank you for that. And what about, like, there's certain words that they could get us as humans, but kind of what you're saying with the punctuation, we can think through it and catch it and adjust based on the situation. But certain words within ASR, what do you think are some common words or phrases you would encourage to pay special attention to? Merritt, will you answer this one for us?
Absolutely. And I was just thinking about that punctuation question, so I want to add one quick thing.
Yeah.
Remember that Gina example from Natalie's video?
Yeah.
Like, is ASR going to know think about the context that there were two Ginas in this person's life, to consider that was non-essential or is more essential because there's two Ginas? Anyway, there are more common words and things that happen with ASR that you need to be on the lookout for. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the those popular ones, like acronyms. Absolutely, like there's not going to get those acronyms that are common in whatever industry it is that you're reporting on. Homonyms, huge. And also words that will get stuck to the previous speaker. A lot of those okays and all rights that we were talking about earlier as well will get stuck to maybe the witness, as if the witness said okay at the end of their answer, as opposed to the attorney saying okay at the beginning of their question. So watch out for that. And what's another capitalization or just legal formatting in general. Like it doesn't know all of those things. So that is why we need to know all of it. Like Liz said, like be able to do it with a blank canvas so that when we see that something's wrong with the ASR, we know, oh, we need to fix this. Like capitalizing when court should be capitalized is a good example of something.
Great example.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. And some of those are contract specific, right? Too. So it's not even necessarily anything that's a grammar rule, but something that absolutely the person that's doing it would need to know, not an ASR is going to know. So let's hop over and we'll talk some on the terminology. So terminology kind of gets thrown around a little bit everywhere. And so let's just go through some of that. One of the terms that we hear tossed around quite a bit is first draft. So Lindsay, can you explain what that means really in practice, what all is entailed and expected with a first draft?
So once the audio has been transcribed, that's your first draft. So it's your unedited, rough draft of your first pass or listen of the audio. You'll have the speaker IDs and maybe some notes on where to put parentheticals or other formatting. But overall, it's just the transcription of the audio, not the cover pages. So when using ASR, the first draft is just what the ASR outputs. Not using ASR, a transcriptionist types out the audio their first time, and that's the first pass. And then stenographers and voice writers create the first pass with their steno machine or their steno mask.
Okay, perfect. So what about, like you hear a lot turn, especially as maybe reporters are hearing it or different things are put in as orders or notes or whatnot for a rough draft. So Merritt, can you kind of expand the difference then between the first draft and a rough draft?
Yes, absolutely. And I like to make the distinction between the two just because there is a minor distinction. The first pass, like Lindsay said, it's just like the first version of the transcript. The rough transcript, or sometimes called the dirty transcript, that attorneys are familiar with that terminology because it's a service we provide them. I like to just make the distinction because with a rough, there is usually a little bit more cleanup on the first pass before it's provided to the attorney, is especially made sure that the disclaimer is added to the rough draft, you know, saying this is not a verbatim transcript that can't be used for impeachment purposes and that type of thing. So I like to make that distinction when I can, like first pass versus rough draft, what's provided as a service.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So let me see here then. Let's talk about, still on the terms side, but we're going to talk about two different terms that are also somewhat similar but have important distinctions. And Lindsay, I'm going to ask you this one as well. It's the term scoping and proofing. Can you talk through the difference of these two terms, please?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I started my career as a proofreader for stenographers, and there was a very clear separation between the stenographer, the scopist, and the proofreader, and what was expected of each of us. With transcription, it's a little different because transcriptionists are often doing all three jobs, transcribing, scoping, and proofreading. But I still always stress the importance of separating these three phases. Scoping and proofreading are both editing, but they serve very different functions. The act of scoping is editing the transcript against the audio and making sure that the transcript matches the audio exactly, but it's not that simple. Because scoping also includes formatting, adding in parentheticals, researching, and punctuating. The goal of scoping is to take the first pass and clean it up so that the transcript is verbatim. So you're adding in dropped words or mistranslates, fixing typos, anything to do with the audio is under the scoping umbrella. And then I think of the proofreading stage as visualizing what the client will see. The importance of editing the transcript without the audio is the client won't have the audio. So as a proofreader, if you read a sentence that doesn't make sense, but then you listen to the audio and it does make sense to you, you can't just go, oh, I get it, and move on. You have to make sure that what's being conveyed in the audio is conveyed in the transcript as well. Otherwise, the client's not going to make sense of it either. So this is kind of our test run before the client sees it. Ideally, when proofreading, you'll be cleaning up punctuation to make it read more clearly and maybe cleaning up some typos. But the more errors you have to correct when you're proofreading, the more likely you are to miss other errors. So my biggest tip is don't transcribe the first pass thinking, oh, I can gloss over this part or go a little faster because I'm going to scope it later. And don't go faster while scoping because you know you're going to proofread it later, because all you're doing is training yourself to leave errors behind. So I always, transcribe, take some time. I never do it right away, then scope, and again, take some time, come back and proofread. And treat it as three different jobs at three different times.
Okay, great tips. And I'm going to kind of tie together all of this together with a question that's in the thing. I'm going to throw it to you, Merritt, because I kind of think it speaks to the fact that you're not just throwing. We've all said from these comments, we're not just throwing ASR and calling it a day, and that's what it is. So the question is, how do you address certifying a transcript that you used ASR on? Do you mind answering that one for us, Merritt?
Absolutely. The answer is we're using it as a tool. We absolutely have to have the human involvement to do the scoping and the proofing before we certify the transcript. So ASR is only taking away that first step for us, that first pass step. The human is still involved in the scoping and proofing, and that's why we can put the certificate with our sign name on it.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to say we're at time. Like literally, I think we could have a 3-hour webinar and still have like tons of stuff to go through, you guys. So please forgive me. I'm going to go over. But if you guys have to go, you would get credit for CEU up to this point. But I want to ask a couple really important questions that we still had left to discuss. Okay, so please just give a little grace. So Liz, I'm going to actually throw this one to you because you spoke about all of this kind of a little bit too. What are some of the things that you weigh out when you're deciding on what ASR, or if you want to use ASR for a particular job?
So how long the job is it worth paying for the ASR? If I have a 7-minute hearing, I'm probably not going to run that through ASR. It's going to be faster for me to just type it. The other thing is going to be the cost of the ASR. So, if I've got a contract where I'm averaging, I don't know, $40 an hour to type it up, do I want to pay, $30 an hour for ASR-A versus $10 an hour for ASR-B? Probably not, because I'm going to eat into my profit margin. So how much am I eating into that? And then I'm looking at accuracy. So there's some ASRs, and I'm trying really hard to leave names out of this, but I think most of us who've used them know what's what. There's some ASRs that are great on the price point, not great on the accuracy. There's other ASRs that they've got that accuracy really down point, but they're super expensive. So how much am I going to put in behind it? What do I want to do with that ASR? So those are the things that I'm looking at. I personally have an ASR that I like, but I had to write a code to use it. Most people can't do that. So, if you can't write a code, you need to find out how easy is that ASR to access. There's ASRs that'll take any kind of file format. There's other ones that don't like FTR. You can't run an FTR file through it. So what formatting are you using? I mean, there's just a lot of different things that go into it. You need to weigh out what's going to work best for you and what's going to be most cost effective for you. In the end, my goal is cost effective.
Right. Yeah. At the end of the day, you're trying to make money and make it benefit for your time and what you're doing. And I love to, like, honestly, a lot of what you're saying takes knowledge and insight to weigh out those different tools. And that again comes because you've had the experience from bottoms up of doing the legal transcription. You know how that time is going to balance out. And you also know what you could do yourself in certain scenarios and different things. You also mentioned another tip that you do is even maybe you're using ASR for several jobs and doing the different processes after it. You still sometimes challenge yourself just to type so you don't lose that skill and that finesse and the memory, the muscle memory, right?
I do. And I did that today. I caught myself doing it. I'll go through and, this first sentence, the ASR didn't pick it up right. So I'll type it out. And then now I've pushed the ASR down and I'm just going to type the rest of it. And when I get tired of typing it, I'll cut it out and bring the ASR back up to me.
Yeah, I love that. And then just one more thing too, because I like what you brought out. I also think it's another tip that you don't know what you don't know about the coding or different things. Probably not a path that a ton of people want to get into. But what I like about that is that shows the more you're involved with your community, the more you're talking to different people and professionals in your career, the more you know what kind of options are out there, what people are doing. You'll find out more what tools maybe are best for certain proceedings or audio or different things like that. So I just think it's another great testament for being involved, be a part of AAERT, be a part of like membership groups out there and things on Facebook. And, that's how you start to get some of that deeper level and insight, right?
Yeah. So, I just to, and I know we're over on time, but I was the one who kind of built and designed up the ASR system that they use over at Depot Direct. I was working with them at the time, and they wanted something that was better than what they thought was better than everything else. And so I helped them design that. And one of the things was the engine that they used required a specific code. And I had no idea I've never written code before. I didn't know anything about code and all the different types of code. And so I literally had to give myself a crash course on how do I write this code. And ultimately that didn't work for me either. Ultimately, I ended up going to ChatGPT and saying, write a code for this. And I took the code and copied it. And I've got it sitting on a Word document that I copy and paste every time.
So many resources and ways you could be creative. All right. I want to ask you another important thing. So we talked a little bit, I heard, I want to remember if it was both Merritt or Lindsay brought up little pieces of it, but being aware and capturing what you're hearing, you know, the whole audio visual illusion per se. So I was going to ask Lindsay, could you give a little bit more context on some tips of how we could make sure what is that illusion and how we can best work through it?
Absolutely. So audio visual illusions, especially if you, I mean, it can happen if you're transcribing yourself. You hear something, it's kind of hard, you write what you think it is, and then you come back to it, and then you're listening and you're like, it doesn't quite add up, but your brain is very easily tricked. If it's reading something and listening and you're telling your brain that's it, it's going to think that's it. So when I worked in quality control, I heard so many times from transcriptionists, this is 100% what they said, but it doesn't make any sense. So I get the timestamp from them and I listen to it, and I'm not reading I don't want any context. I listen to it and I might not get the inaudible right away, but I did not hear what they heard. So they're definitely not 100% hearing it. And that's the hardest thing. It's kind of that you don't know what you don't know. But they did say, it sounds like this, but it's not right. Trust your gut when it's not right, because your brain can be tricked. You should look this up. There's so many like videos where if you're reading it, and it's kind of like like an echo chamber where if you keep coming back to your transcription, or you think you heard this and you keep reading it, you keep listening to it, all you're doing is cementing in your mind that it's right, even if it's not. So I always say, like, cleanse your brain, leave it, go away for like a full day. The next day, come in, don't look at your transcription at all. Like, totally cleanse your brain and just listen to the audio, close your eyes, and just never put in something that you're like, I think it sounds like this, but I'm not sure, because you're probably right. It's probably not it. Have someone else listen to it. But the biggest thing is just recognizing how easy your brain can be tricked and not fooling yourself into thinking, yes, this is definitely what I've heard. Know that it's not, and try to find a way to hear it correctly. And that's where ASR can help as well. If you need to send it through, it might hear something else. Don't trust it entirely, but it might get you a little further along that path.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so we definitely had a couple more. We'll fit that in along with your questions you guys have. I see Natalie and Ben were answering some questions in the chat, so thank you guys for that. We'll also incorporate them all through, and we'll give more information for you guys, maybe in a blog or something like that. Just stay tuned and we'll kind of get that for you. But thank you everybody for staying for this entire time. We appreciate it so much. We hope you found everything to be very beneficial and informative. Thank you guys, the panelists, Natalie, Ben, Lindsay, Merritt, Liz, thank you so much for joining us, for all your insight and time. We appreciate you so much. And for everyone that's on, first of all, thank you for all your reactions, your engagement, your questions. You are what makes this webinar what it is. We appreciate you, and all the different information that you're looking for helps us know what to best provide for you next time. So thank you so much for that. It was a blast. We appreciate you.
Have a great
All
night.
right.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Take care. See you next time.